Okay, so what we'll do is I will give you a quick refresher on how to find things from off campus. There has been a lot of problems lately with the browsers as well. So I've had to switch browsers and upgrade browsers. It's been ridiculous. Part of the reason I haven't graded things is because Blackboard won't let me. And then I have this other problem here, like this handout, I don't think you can open because it gets saved as a document and a PDF or a document and an HTML. So I have no idea what's going on. I think the internet has lost its mind. But the to get to the, at least to get to the library databases, you need to log into the library. So if, did you have the click here?
Yes, ma'am, I did. But right when I clicked it, it said that it wasn't able to find it. Yeah,
Okay.
it said that.
Yeah, let's try this way. All right. So when you click on the link, it says Green Sky or the Library Database Films on Demand, and watch the full program for Zora Neale Hurston, A Heart with Room for Every Joy. Okay, that's super fun. Doesn't work either. So the other option is to go to the library. And this is just how I go to the library page. Library has this new thing called Search Up that drives me crazy. So you go right past that and to A to Z databases. And almost everything that I like to use is in Films on Demand. So you go to that database. And you can search the title. And here's the full video. I don't know why. There are so many problems with Blackboard right now that, you know, unfortunately you probably have to go to the library databases to find everything. And then when you go to the library database, if you're off campus, you probably have to log in. It'll ask you to log in again to the library database. Or if you use Spartan Green Sky, then you log into that, and I don't think you have to log into the library database. But this is a 42-minute video, and it was a little slow at the beginning, but then it gets a little better and a little bit more entertaining. So that's how you get to go through the library database to get to the video. And the video is helpful because it does entertain some of those questions we've been thinking about with, you know, I framed it with Hughes and Schuyler, but it's far deeper and more expansive than that. The question of, is Black art or Black culture truly different, and why? And what's at stake? What are the dangers of presenting that difference? I think what we really get with the Hughes-Schuyler debate is those two questions. Hughes insists that it's different, and Schuyler says, yeah, if we talk about difference, we're getting ourselves into a lot of trouble and danger, so let's just not do that, due to racial caricatures, stereotypes, and all kinds of nonsense like that that still persists. So I'm going to go to your paper right here. Now, one thing I noticed about your paper is that you begin with a very long quote from Hughes. So I'm using track changes here, and what I would suggest, especially with a shorter paper, if you would like to use a long quote like that, which is perfectly okay, and I told you to use it, I should have written the paper directions like I usually do, which is to ask people to create an epigraph And an epigraph is a quote that sets the stage for your discussion and that you analyze to talk about the particular issue. So people who have taken classes with me, English classes, will be familiar with my obsession with the epigraph. So usually they can be centered, or I don't think you center them. I think you increase the margins, and you can single space them because it makes them a little bit visually different. And I'm going to indent it an inch. I think that is the official way you're supposed to do it, but I'm not good at remembering rules of any kind, so we'll just pretend that that's the rule. So now we have your paper with a segment that clearly distinguishes between your discussion and Hughes's voice. And by making an epigraph, you're asking your reader to consider this quote, but you're not letting Langston Hughes take over your paper. Because in a paper, it's very important to establish your voice in your argument. So I would say, we'll just start your paragraph here. And because we've now made it into an epigraph, we'll know directly what you refer to. So the epigraph expresses how middle and upper class African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance saw the advantages of being white instead of rather being willing to embrace their Black culture, such as other artists have done. The Harlem Renaissance author Langston Hughes explains African Americans had to face the barriers that came with wanting to show art that represents Black culture. That results in many Black people had the desire of being white to live a better life. Hughes discusses how whiteness is perceived by Black people in the middle class by stating from the passage, "I want to be a poet, not a Negro poet," meaning I believe, I want to write like a white poet, meaning behind that, I would like to be white, showing that whiteness was viewed as better, beautiful, classy, and acceptable. So that's a kind of long sentence too with that quote, and I would prefer that you break it up a little bit more with your own commentary. So let's start right up at the top again. The epigraph expresses how middle and upper class African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance saw the advantages of being white instead of being willing to embrace their Black culture. So the artists have done is a little bit tricky with the verb conjugations. So usually when you're writing, even if you're writing about the past, if you're writing about a story or a narrative like this, you can use the present tense. So you do have, but of course, since we're saying Harlem's Renaissance, we have to put it in the past tense. So let's see. The other thing is, he doesn't say, "I want to be a white poet, not a Negro poet." He says, "I want to be a poet." So we might want, so Hughes goes on to say that he wants to be white. The question then is one of assimilation. So expresses is usually an example of feeling, but here I think we can just say explains Hughes's point rather than expresses. The epigraph explains how middle and upper class African Americans may be recognized the advantages of assimilation, because they can't be white, right?
Right.
Rather than embracing Black culture. So if we say rather than embracing Black culture, we've made this much more concise and to the point. Harlem Renaissance author Langston Hughes explains African Americans had to face the barriers that came with, let's say, rather than wanting to show art that represents, engaging in Black culture.
Okay.
So what I'm doing essentially in these suggestions for revision is trying to choose more specific active verbs rather than stringing together wanting to show art that represents. You know, that you're kind of telling the story, and I can see in my mind what they want to do, but what the effect of that is to engage in Black culture, which makes it a little less wordy. So because there were barriers in engaging with Black culture, and here you want to maybe be a little bit more specific again, because Hughes says later that economically and politically he can see why this is important. And I'm going to switch over really quickly to something else to show you, because as I read everyone's papers, I was thinking about what we can learn from the paper and how we can build on the knowledge in this paper to go a little further. So I made a new discussion forum, and this does relate to the point I'm trying to make here about revision. So bear with me. Many people, almost everybody was moved by Eddie Glaude. So I pulled a specific quote from Eddie Glaude that I shortened a little bit, and just kind of balance all of this in your head as we think about, you know, what you have voiced as people wanting to be white too, and to get away from the racial mountain, versus ways we can more specifically indicate how Hughes explains that that won't work. Because at the end of the day, he doesn't just want to criticize them. He shows that he's like, good luck with that, you know? And as we know now, it wouldn't have worked. Schuyler's whole plan was kind of futile. So Glaude says, I have had the privilege of growing up in a tradition that didn't believe in the myths and legends because we had to bear the brunt of them. So this is what Hughes is saying. You have to bear the brunt of the myths and legends because you're Black. So whether or not you engage in Black culture, you still have to bear the brunt. And I think that Hughes recognizes that as well. So Glaude goes on to say, well, we try to convince white folk to finally leave behind a history that will maybe embrace a history that might set them free from being white, finally. And Hughes has a similar idea, because what Hughes sees the Black artist doing is to convince white folk that Black history and Black culture are worthwhile. And then, of course, Black people have to stand by that and believe it too. Because that's the only way that if you don't believe in the myths and legends, that's the only resistance to the brunt of the real things that happen because of those myths and legends. It's kind of one of the only forms of resistance. And I'm sorry that I'm rambling on here. Do you think you can paraphrase what I just said, like a normal person?
Yeah, I think so. It's like, if I'm getting it correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's like basically saying that, you know, in order to believe that Blackness is great, Black people have to believe it. Not only that, but like, I guess what I was trying to say in my paper is that, like, it doesn't matter how much you try to be quote unquote white, you still going to be seen for your skin color. You're not going to be seen as, you know, the person who's taught proper, or this person got a great job or anything. If they see you as Black, they're going to see you as Black.
Right. And in one of our previous discussions, we were joking about Karens, and you said you and your mother joked about the Karens, you know?
Yeah.
And forgive me if I'm wrong, but that also says to me that you were raised in a culture and in a family that didn't believe the myths and legends, that you don't believe you're inferior. but you know that you will be treated as such, and you have to put your hands on the dashboard if you get pulled over.
Right.
So forgive me for that really kind of broad generalization and reduction of the issue. What Glaude is saying, and I believe what Hughes is saying, is we're going to take this shit no matter what. If we can uphold the representations, if we can continue to create an art and a culture and an image that tells the truth, then maybe white people can be released from this crazy idea that they're superior. Because white people will also learn to value Black culture and Black people for a different yet still very American and patriotic experience. So I think Coates and I think Glaude and a lot of people are saying the only hope to save, and Baldwin definitely says, the only way we can save these white people from themselves, from their ignorance and their childishness, and that's what Baldwin says, will be to lovingly show them who we are. And forgive me for using the royal we, because I'm not part of that, but that it's very important to embrace the true broad scope of American history and culture and memory. Do you disagree?
I would have to like agree. I know that like as Black people, we tend to show our true selves,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm I always say that it's gonna always be those. It's always gonna be people who's just not gonna be able to see it, no matter how hard we try. And I remember because like I said, I'm a transfer student, so I used to go to Furman, and which is a very racist school. Um and so, and I will always say that I'm not going to keep proving who I am
Right.
just for them to see that, I'm not that stereotypical Black girl that they already presume that I am. I said they're going to see me how they're going to see me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what I do. First of all, they think that I got here because of some type of sad story, not because of my academics.
For
So,
your scholarship, did you know that all Black students go to college for free?
mm-mm.
That's what most white students think.
Oh no.
I didn't post on a discussion board that she didn't get any scholarships for college, even though she is one of the smartest people in the state. She didn't say that, but she said something to that effect, because she's not Black or a minority.
Mm-mm. That's
It's
crazy.
the whole affirmative action debate is kind of, people have conflated it with a welfare debate. So they don't understand that there's no handouts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you make an important point. Here is the school in Utah that was going to make Black History Month optional, and then the NAACP called and said, "What the hell is wrong with you people?" So the school leaders had a dialogue with parents, and parents were like, "Oh, okay, I guess we can do that." But it's similar to the executive order that Trump made, that you can't, you basically can't talk about race or diversity training in federal jobs. So, so the points moving forward are that I think Hughes tells us, okay, you can go ahead and try and assimilate, but you're still going to face the racial mountain. So if we really want to proceed in this world, then continuing to produce Black art and Black culture is the only possible way to start, getting white people out of their fog. So, everybody kind of wrote a lot about the assimilation and the fact that racism was so bad, people tried to escape into whiteness, and that's absolutely true. But then 100 years later, we can ask slightly different questions. So Hughes says in his final retort to Schuyler, until America has completely absorbed Black culture, and he says the Negro, but I made it, more contemporary language by putting it in those brackets. Until America has completely absorbed Black culture, and until segregation and racial self-consciousness have entirely disappeared, the true work of art from the Black artist is bound, if it have any color and distinctiveness at all, to reflect his racial background and his racial environment. So what he says there, I think, becomes far more clear, and it kind of begs two more questions. Until segregation and race consciousness have disappeared, like, is that really going to happen? Is it ever going to happen? Huge question mark. But he insists that the Black artist has to reflect Black culture, both background and environment. Not any kind of peculiarity or something that comes genetically, from your DNA because you're Black. So then like I said, begs the question, if these things disappeared, what would happen to Black art? Would we not have it anymore? Of course we would still have it. It's integral to American culture. I think maybe just then cultural appropriation by other cultures wouldn't be such a problem. I don't know. And how do we separate Black art from American art? Or what does Hurston give us that we couldn't get from Carl Van Vechten, that crazy white guy? So those are just questions to think about as we build on some of the ideas from the paper, okay? So kind of juggle all this in your brain. So back to your paper. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
So we still have barriers with engaging in Black culture. Back then, I think people wanted to assimilate. Probably 100 years ago, the possibility of assimilation might have seemed more realistic. At this point, I think it's, we're never going to stop noticing that not everybody looks alike. There's elderly Chinese packed in California for bringing the China virus. So that, we're not going to stop looking at people and seeing how they look different. So just to think about, so certainly there are barriers that come with engaging in Black culture. Many Black people wanted to use a strategy of showing that they could assimilate to showing that they were equal. And do you remember the scene in Bessie where Carl Van Vechten says, here's the best Negro poet in America, and Bessie says, well, who's the best regular poet in America?
Yes, I remember that part.
Yeah.
I always noticed that they never see like Black people as just regular poets. Like regular poets just automatically equal to a white person. It's like in order to order to know that person is Black, you have to put Black in front of it.
Yeah. But it's funny that I guess yeah, the term regular, when Bessie Smith says it, and I don't know that Bessie Smith actually said that. It'd be interesting to know. But right, usually regular means white. But Bessie kind of trips that up just like she trips up the paper bag test. So so many Black people dealt with the racial mountain that Hughes describes by trying to be white. And so that's a way we can shorten this. I'm going to use a semicolon there.
Okay.
We can just say he explains. And that way we're connecting this long quote by him to a fairly balanced, longer, but more direct introduction by you. Many Black people try to avoid what Hughes calls the racial mountain by assimilating, he explains, hearing someone say, I suppose. He describes, not explains. I want to be a poet, not a Negro poet. Trying to figure out what to do with the. I'm just going to put no page here and end this sentence.
Okay.
To bring your voice back into it. So, why does Hughes think that just wanting to be a regular poet means not wanting to be Black and wanting to be white instead?
Because like I mentioned, that it always seems like in order to get an advantage, like I said, like the regular most of the time just equals like white. So like basically he's just feeling like I think when he heard that he just want to be a regular poet and not a Negro poet, he just heard whiteness because that's what it mostly means.
Yeah. Okay, so I just kind of caught what you said there a little bit. So in order to gain any advantages in a country where regular means white and Black means inferior, Hughes says, so a poet must deny Blackness. So there we've just kind of introduced a little bit more what he says, meaning I believe I want to write like a white poet, meaning I would like to be white. And then this part showing that whiteness was viewed as better, beautiful, classy, and acceptable. You have a quote after that, but that's you, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so we can just put close the quote there, showing that whiteness was an acceptable and more desirable. Or let's say it maybe was the only acceptable and desirable way to be American. So yeah, I think with the regular there, regular also means American. Why couldn't Carl Van Vechten have said that Langston Hughes was the best American poet, right? So I think you've already explained, but they can't be white. So then this next sentence isn't going to be, this next sentence isn't really necessary, right?
Okay.
I think that instead, you know, that's the only way to be American is true. Whoops, don't do that. Sorry, goofed the whole thing up. So I want to start a new paragraph here with Du Bois. So I have to do there. When I have to put the paragraph at the end of the paragraph. So yeah, so that also plays into your next point. We want to be full-fledged Americans. So rather than have this whole long quote, you can continue to connect that idea of the regular poet being the American poet and whether or not Du Bois suggests that people should assimilate. Now, you haven't seen the video yet, but in the Zora Neale Hurston video, the narrator says that when W.B. Du Bois says all art is propaganda, he means that all Black writers have to represent themselves as equal by aspiring to the dominant culture, and they have to seem like white poets in order to. And I was just like, what? Because I have read almost everything that W.B. Du Bois has written, and no way does W.B. Du Bois, yes, art is propaganda. It's white propaganda. It's Black propaganda. So what Du Bois is saying is, you can be bougie or you can be bluesy. You just have to remember that this is how we show ourselves to the world. He doesn't say you have to be bougie, but that's how that's what the video says. So in the quiz, I go on a tirade. But anyway, back to Du Bois. To be American means that you can have these dreams of equality. And also, Hughes says at the end of that article, before he says until America has completely absorbed Black culture, he says something to the effect of, or let's look specifically at what he says. From an economic and sociological viewpoint, it may be entirely desirable that the Negro become as much like his white American brother as possible. Surely colored people want all the opportunities and advantages that anybody else possesses here in our country. But until America gets over itself, we need to keep being Black, and we need to show everybody that that also means equal. So I just did a really quick, but I think Hughes is saying the same thing Du Bois says here. Yes, we want the same opportunities and advantages of being an American, but that doesn't mean we don't want to have the right to be ourselves. And Du Bois never insisted on people being bourgeois, although it is true that the crisis and the NAACP had a lot of light-skinned people and a lot of people with their hair straightened, and that the Crisis magazine was not as flying in the face of primitivism as Fire. So Hughes and, might have been Hughes and Hurston. W.B. Du Bois is one of the founders of the NAACP. He is an NAACP leader, and the NAACP started the magazine The Crisis to represent Black culture, and The Crisis had competitions for short stories and poems, and they did a lot to contribute to Black culture. They also had these pictures of African Americans on the cover all the time that were almost always light-skinned people. So the issue that comes up in Bessie with The Crisis also, or that comes up with NAACP, you can also see in The Crisis. But The Crisis archive is online. So let's just take a quick look at it. And I'm trying to see. There's also very frequently interesting things in The Crisis. Let's see if we can go back to the archival covers. I used to have copies, but then for some reason I didn't think I needed them anymore. So let's go to lots in Google Books from many time periods. Let's just look at these two things in the Internet Archive that are kind of close to 26. So there is one Du Bois is the editor writing the opinion. So when you see the pictures of people in the crisis, they do tend to be kind of white looking. And Kinsey also made a point about people passing. Now here's some more black bourgeoisie, and but here, you know, here are black people who are clearly African American, although there's a few light-skinned people, okay? And photography was a really useful tool. Okay, now that picture is, who's that supposed to be? So you see, the crisis has these pictures of black women on the cover that do tend to be lighter in complexion, but then there are plenty of black people, and it's also not particularly the fault of light-skinned people that they're light-skinned. What? Passing for colored, I'm sorry. Black Swan, that's the record. Oh yeah, that's the record company that Bessie was talking about. I need to make that bigger. Sorry, I have a real problem with, the only genuine colored record is Black Swan. Buy them regularly from your agent and dealers. We have some exceptionally good records. The others are passing for colored. Yeah, that's true. Isn't that funny? Passing for colored has become popular since we established Black Swan, the only colored record sung by colored artists and made by a colored company. At least 3 white concerns are now catering Negro buyers and advertising in Negro newspapers. The new race record. And actually, Bessie Smith says, I don't want to be in your race records. Tells the people that for Columbia. So that is directly referring back to Bessie. So I don't think that we can say that Du Bois is, you know, he's the editor of this magazine. I don't think we can say that Du Bois is telling people to assimilate. Although there is the problem with Black Swan Records in Bessie where they choose Ethel Waters instead, and she is not as wild as Bessie. There we have another light-skinned woman. So yeah, there are these light-skinned hair straightening kind of things, advertisements in the crisis, and there's also these covers with light-skinned women. But I'm not saying that, you know, there was no catering to the black bourgeoisie, but in his 1911 novel, Du Bois really criticizes the black bourgeoisie. So anyway, I will stop ranting. I'm sorry about that. Back to what you're trying to say here. And using Hughes' language, which is in terms of opportunity, right? Here we need a transition to talk about Du Bois. What would you say black people wanted in terms of opportunity? What would you say that Hughes or Du Bois or black culture wanted and probably still wants?
Is to have equal rights and
Yeah.
to have the same opportunity as the white person, not the bare minimum.
And I think that's true of Schuyler too. Du Bois said, what do we want? We want to be full-fledged Americans. Then stop the end of the sentence. And I think you can clarify there that, like Hughes, Okay. So I'm just bridging Hughes. Hughes thinks that Black people bring something distinct to the table, and Du Bois definitely does too. And don't get me going about the video again. Du Bois wants Black people to receive, yeah, okay, yeah, we want to be full-fledged Americans, but also don't forget who we are, because we've done a whole bunch of stuff. Look,
Right.
And me, again, using the royal we that I'm not actually part of, so forgive me. Black people want, but so when Du Bois says there flashes clairvoyance of what America really is, we can see America in a way that white America cannot. That is incredibly important, because the struggle and the perseverance can teach white America so much. And Ta-Nehisi Coates says in another text we're reading in another class, so you wouldn't be expected to know this, but consider how white people have temper tantrums about coronavirus. I don't want to wear a mask. It's my civil right not to wear a mask. Like, stop it, crybaby. The whole Karen thing, right? Like, deal with the diversity, people. And there are many ways that white privilege makes a bunch of crybabies out of Americans. So I think you can bring that idea in a little bit with this idea of perseverance and contribution. So to explain what Du Bois means here in these next couple of sentences, what would you say that he's saying? Do we want? Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like he's saying that, like, I know we want equality because of, we shouldn't be judged for our skin color, but also America is different from white people than it is from Black people, because we honestly we deal with the discrimination, we see how they treat us. So it's going to be harder for most white people to understand what we go through, because, like I always say, this country was built for them. The government, the way the rules are set up, the rights, is mostly was built for white people. So now that we're trying to change things, they can't understand it because they have been comfortable for so many years, and like where they've been. So now that change is coming, they become crybabies.
Mm-hmm.
and and they can't understand that in order to have equality, you have to have change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm trying to paraphrase here. So the discomfort okay, so let's see. Du Bois would like white people to understand what Black people have endured and the ways the country has been built for white people, the discomfort and constant striving for change that Black people have undertaken to maybe just gain some inclusion. As I'm going to use the word endowed. And I'm just going to say tools. You didn't say that whites lack. Some tools and possibly some insights on how democracy works.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm putting words in your mouth here, but so Du Bois is just going to allude to the gifts, and that's a word that Du Bois uses all the time. So I'm putting Du Bois's words in your mouth, not mine. Okay. So now you see how much more that puts your voice and your explanation into the Du Bois quote. All of this red addition allows you to bring together Du Bois and Hughes and explain from a little bit more of your perspective, with a little of me putting words in your mouth, but also more of me trying to paraphrase you, what the conversation is about.
Yeah, thank you. Because, like, I'm not the best paper writer. Like, I know how to write because I'm a psychology major, so I know how to write for psychology. But like English, I get all confused.
Well, Yeah, I mean, I guess for psychology, you're writing about terms and concepts that other people have defined in their research, right?
Right.
And maybe applying them. So what this asks you to do is if you become the person who is actually undertaking the research as a psychologist, then you need to explain a little bit further. So this kind of pushing the explanation would prepare you for doing research in psychology that's your own research.
Yes.
So, do we simply want to be Americans? We can see America in the way that others cannot. Now, your sentence here, though, so also I want to break this up again because I don't think you can go more than 4 lines without getting into trouble.
Okay.
So, let's see. Actually, no, we'll leave it like that. But I think, and seeing our country, thus are we satisfied, is the way where you have to stop.
Okay.
So how would you explain again what that means? Perspective, right? Did we say that? Yeah, right. So how is the African American perspective different?
The African American perspective is different because we deal with the disadvantages and the discrimination. And no matter how hard we try, we always going to be seen for our skin color, and we always going to be seen as incapable, and just for being black.
Yeah, but what can white America learn from the perspective that comes from disadvantage and discrimination?
I really don't know. The reason why I say that is because I feel like if they just see us, they will see what we are capable of doing. But I feel like in order for them to learn, they're not. It's up to them to want to learn from us.
Right, that's true. I think I'm getting this from Trevor Noah, but in the case of coronavirus, people having a fit about having where they're allowed to go limited and shorter hours. I mean, that's what segregation was like,
Yes.
6 feet apart from people. So segregation was the first social distancing. And although it wasn't a good way to stop the spread of disease, a lot of white people thought that they were stopping the spread of the contagion, the contamination of blackness. You've seen the movie The Help, I
Oh
suppose.
yes, and they had gave her a separate bathroom.
Yeah, because part of the racist science that was inaccurate was that it was dangerous to be around black people because they had different diseases, and that's just completely insane. But there's a lot to be improved on here. But just how do we deal with adversity? White Americans are doing a shitty job dealing with adversity. That's why we have coronavirus surges, because people can't handle a little social distancing and wearing a mask, whereas segregation was a whole bunch of social distancing.
Yeah, and then also I always say that they have a hard time being told what to do. Like as black people, if we told something or we know it's out of our control, we tend to kind of like we get upset. Yes, we get upset and we may rant about it, but we tend to go to another level. Like we just try to find a different option and
Yeah.
or we just start something on our own. Like,
Or just don't get upset about it.
huh?
Don't get upset. Like, yeah, it's a pain in the ass to wear a mask. Get over it.
Yeah.
Shut up. Like, my mom whines about coronavirus. I'm like, deal with it, mom. It's a pandemic. So is racism, and black people have been dealing with that for a long time. So we don't deserve to whine just because we have to deal with another pandemic.
Right.
So, how to deal with it, not only how to deal with adversity, but also, are we satisfied with our present goals and ideas? How to become better, how to become stronger,
Mhm.
Democracy requires attention and work. It's not like automatic. It's not supposed to be easy. So democracy is not a privilege, and it's not an entitlement, and it's not an inheritance. And Thomas Jefferson never thought it would be. He thought there'd be a revolution every other generation. I think for Du Bois, democracy is not a given. And it's not easy. I'm going to put more words in your mouth, okay? So when he asked that question, are we happy with how things are? Hell no.
No. Oh no.
Now then you say that expresses more of the reason of wanting to be white comes from seeing that there are two kinds of America. That can you explain that statement?
Yes. I was saying what I was trying to say is that like when you honestly see, like I always say a white person. I remember this guy I was in class with a long time ago when I was at Furman, and he said, "I always want to know how it is to be white." He said, "I want to know how it is to be comfortable, how it is to know that you have that privilege. It doesn't matter if you like come from a poor family, or a rich family. It's just the simple fact that you know that you're gonna always be protected because of your skin color." He said, "I'm over here trying to work so hard because I know that because I'm black, I got locks in my head, and where I come from, my mannerism, people are gonna automatically see me as the thug or a hood dude. So it's gonna be hard for people to understand who I am." And he said, "I just always want to know how it is to just be white, to know that you're gonna always be okay."
So that's why white people are having a fit about quarantine, in a nutshell, right?
Yes.
So no, we're not happy with how it is. It would be nice to be so entitled. Entitlement and privilege are great. And just go ahead. The pandemic hits you, and whine, cry, and throw a tantrum over social distancing and wearing a mask. Whereas Paul Dunbar, you ever heard Paul Laurence Dunbar, the poet? He wrote a poem called "We Wear the Mask."
Yeah.
So we could make a really funny. We could start to make a lot of funny jokes and puns about Black history right now. And I'm going to make a joke here. Okay, I can't help.
Okay.
Sorry. There you go. Okay, so we already know that it's the Harlem Renaissance author, Langston.
Okay.
We can just call him Hughes now.
All
So
right.
Hughes explains, we end at 12:05, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hughes explains African Americans during that time had to face the barriers that came with wanting to show art that represents Black culture. Being African American at the time resulted in them still dealing with racial hatred. Many white people joined the Ku Klux Klan. Okay. This urge within the race toward whiteness. Okay. So let's just add a and Hughes says, what's going to happen if this happens? right?
Right.
You're still going to be Black.
Mhm.
So Blackheart. This gets a little repetitive here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually completely repetitive. Now, Simone brings up this "don't be like the N-word." So I think where you want to go here is that this, although Eddie Glaude says he was fortunate enough to be raised in a tradition where they didn't believe the myths and legends, now you're switching over to saying this is a form of self-loathing and what do we call it? Internalized racism.
Mhm.
So the racial mountain isn't just the Ku Klux Klan, it's also internalized racism. Okay? And this again gets a little repeated. This is repeated again. Oh, here's actually what I paraphrased you as saying. So it just takes you a little bit longer to get to exactly what the point is, because this part right here, that's the part I paraphrased that you said before. Before I started making coronavirus jokes. So you say everything twice and then you make your point.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is repetitive, so I'm just going to cut it.
Okay.
And this goes with the idea of internalized racism.
Okay.
And this rephrasing is okay.
Okay.
And then, all right, that's all good. But yeah, I just cut some of the redundancy and I broke up the quotes and put more of your voice sooner.
Okay.
Okay?
It sounds better now.
It's a little bit more to the point and it's a little bit more clear, I think.
Yes.
Also, you need a better title. I think that no other professor is going to ever let you do this, but I think something funny like "It's your pandemic now, Karen." A good title, because that's the issue.
Yes.
We'll just call it our collaboration. That's the new title. And we'll work on our comedy routine later. So what I'll do is I'll post this revised version for people to look over so that we can all think about. And another thing that we've done, you make this point that this country was built for white people and they don't understand that, but the experience of having lived in a country that someone was built for someone else kind of made Black culture stronger and made it distinctive. You make that point really late. We move that way sooner.
Yes.
And I would like to look at that predominantly I'd like the whole class to look at that, you know? I don't want the whole class to continue to say, oh my God, that's so racist. Oh my God, that's so racist. Because that's just going to make us tired.
Yeah, it's
Important
exhausting.
to acknowledge, yes, we all need to be on the same page. Yes, that's racist. However, there is also really good stuff going on, and that's where we can find the common ground to move forward. So it's okay if we use, if I post this as well for the
Yeah,
quiz?
that's fine.
All right, well, thank you so much for your input and for being a really good sport with me making your paper look like it bled severely. And then me looking like a fool at the end because what I said was me paraphrasing and, oh, I'm sorry if I'm putting words in you actually go ahead and say in a very strong conclusion. So I think we're good. I don't think I really put words in your mouth.
Oh no, I think we just work together as a team.
And that's what a paper is. It's a conversation. We don't get to think of it that often because we have to lock ourselves away and write it all alone, but yeah, you're kind of mediating this conversation with this imagined audience of other people who read Du Bois and Hughes. So I will post this, and I will soon post a quiz about Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Okay.
But obviously you can begin with that quiz about the video because the video is a strong introduction and connection. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, you have a great long weekend and happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Bye-bye.